Did history's most infamous killer just vanish into thin air? Imagine a murderer so elusive, so terrifying, that even today, we're left in the dark. The year was 1888, and a wave of fear swept through the East End of London. A wave brought on by a shadow, someone, or something, who could take life and vanish without a trace. They called him Jack the Ripper. Today, we dive into the story of this faceless killer, the ghost who slipped through the clutches of law, who haunted London with a ruthless precision that left the world speechless. How could someone be this deadly, this skilled at disappearing? Was Jack the Ripper human, or something else? The rise of fear. Our story begins in the impoverished, dimly lit streets of Whitechapel. In Victorian London, Whitechapel was not a place for the faint-hearted. Poverty was rampant, crime was woven into the fabric of daily life, and the police were often overwhelmed. But in August of 1888, something changed. Fear was in the air, thick and inescapable. One by one, the bodies of women started appearing, each victim bearing horrific, surgical-level precision. The killer moved like a phantom, targeting specific women, always disappearing just before authorities arrived. It was as if he knew the streets of Whitechapel better than anyone else. But who was he, and what drove him to such extremes? The newspapers were quick to sensationalize the killings, and as public panic grew, a letter arrived. Signed with a chilling pseudonym, Jack the Ripper, it taunted the authorities and the people of London alike. The name, and the terror, stuck. Jack the Ripper wasn't just a killer, he was becoming a legend. The victims and their stories. We often forget that Jack the Ripper's victims were real people, with lives, dreams, and families. Each of his victims had a story, and by all accounts, they were women in desperate circumstances, often resorting to sex work just to survive. These weren't random acts of violence, they were meticulously chosen, coldly executed. Mary Ann Nichols was the first, found in the early hours of August 31, 1888. Her throat was cut so deep that it nearly severed her head. Then there was Annie Chapman, discovered just over a week later. Her body was mutilated with an intensity that defied human understanding. It was as if the Ripper took pleasure in creating horror, sending a message of pure, calculated evil. Then came Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, both murdered on the same night, an event now referred to as the double event. Eddowes' body, in particular, was left in such a state that even the most seasoned detectives were left shaken. And lastly, there was Mary Jane Kelly, found on November 9th. She was the Ripper's final, and perhaps most gruesome, act. The sheer brutality was unmatched. Her body was barely recognizable. Kelly's death marked the end of Jack the Ripper's spree, but it left the entire city asking, why? Why did he stop, and where did he go? The investigative struggles. The police were desperate. Scotland Yard, with its limited resources, was under intense public scrutiny to find and capture this monster. But the Ripper was meticulous. He left no weapon, no fingerprints, and no clues beyond the horrific state of his victims. This was one of the first investigations in history where detectives attempted to use emerging forensic techniques to track a killer. They began examining the cuts, analyzing the method, the precision. The Ripper's skill led some to speculate he was a surgeon or a butcher, someone who knew anatomy and took his time inflicting the most terror possible. One clue emerged, a piece of Catherine Eddowes' apron, found near a chalk-written message on a wall that read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." But even this message led nowhere. The police were divided on its relevance, and it was soon erased by order of the police commissioner to avoid inciting anti-Semitic riots. Despite the intensity of the manhunt, Jack the Ripper seemed to vanish. Some say he outsmarted the police, others believe he had a network of allies. He was always one step ahead, disappearing as quickly as he'd arrived. Theories and suspects. Over the years, hundreds of theories have surfaced. Some suspect Jack the Ripper was a local butcher, someone with access to the tools and knowledge required for such gruesome acts. Others believe he was a member of the British aristocracy, a theory fueled by the idea that only someone with power and influence could evade justice so completely. One of the most controversial theories is that Jack the Ripper may have been a woman, a midwife who knew anatomy and could wander the streets without arousing suspicion. This theory, though largely dismissed by experts, paints a fascinating picture of a society grasping for answers. Then there was the mysterious figure known as Montague John Drute, a well-educated barrister with suspected ties to the Ripper. Drute died just a month after Mary Jane Kelly's murder, his body found floating in the Thames. He fit the profile of a killer struggling with inner demons, but was it really him? The evidence, if there was any, died with him. And we can't forget Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant and hairdresser who was committed to an asylum shortly after the Ripper's spree ended. Kosminski's mental instability and close proximity to the crime scenes made him a suspect, yet evidence was never enough to make an arrest. Theories of immortality and the paranormal. Some even believe that Jack the Ripper was no mere mortal. He was a creature of darkness, a force that could not die. How else could he have disappeared so completely, leaving the world with no trace, no definitive answer, not even a single shred of DNA? This legend was fueled by stories of strange happenings, sightings of a cloaked figure lurking in the shadows of Whitechapel long after 1888. Some say his spirit haunts those narrow, cobbled streets to this day, an eternal reminder of the horror he inflicted. People speak of an energy that lingers there, a darkness that refuses to die. Even stranger, there are accounts from witnesses at the time who reported seeing a man that vanished before their very eyes. Was Jack the Ripper a man, or something else entirely? Legacy and cultural impact. Jack the Ripper's story has become more than a case of unsolved murders. It's a reflection of our deepest fears, the possibility that true evil can exist and remain unstoppable. The mystery of his identity, his motives, and his chilling ability to evade capture has fascinated generations. Today, Jack the Ripper is an enigma that transcends time and place, a reminder of the fragility of life in a world that can be both beautiful and cruel. His tale has inspired countless novels, films, and investigations, yet every attempt to solve the mystery ends in frustration. And maybe that's why we're so captivated by Jack the Ripper. In a world of certainty, he represents the unsolvable, the unknowable. He is a ghost haunting the collective imagination, the man who could not die. Conclusion. In the end, Jack the Ripper remains a dark figure in history, a legend who eluded justice and carved his name into the minds of millions. His story challenges us to confront our darkest questions. Is there true evil in the world? Can someone really vanish without a trace? And will we ever know who Jack the Ripper really was? For now, we're left with questions, haunted by a specter of the past, a shadow cast by a man who, to this day, refuses to die. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysteries and untold tales. And as always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Thank you for watching. Until next time.